Hi, I'm Josh Rushing, filling in for Lisa Fletcher, and you're in the stream. Today, Israel's hitting Gaza, and Hamas launches rockets into Israel. We take a look at the online battle for hearts and minds. Many of you are already weighing in.
Until now, networks like Twitter could overthrow governments. Now they're a key factor in winning the crucial battle for hearts and minds in armed conflict.
This time, Israel is able to respond timely with truth and fact through social media.
But I think we need to be really careful and watch out for propaganda, as well as the deliberate spread of false information.
Blogger Anousheh Hossein is here looking out for all of your live feedback. You can follow her on Anousheh's Point blog online. Anousheh, the conversation around Gaza is fierce. What's catching your eye?
Yes, Josh, no doubt. Twitter has become a battleground. The Israeli army spokesperson tweeted this image. Have a look on my screen. This is how Hamas sees Israel. Many of you are tweeting about this topic, and we want to hear from you. So tweet us with the hashtag AJStream.
Joining us at the table is Omar Bedard, the new media manager at Arab American Institute. Thanks for being here, Omar.
Thank you very much for having me.
There are many hashtags around the situation in Gaza. Here are a few that we're following. As fears of a ground war in Gaza escalate, the online battle between Israel and Hamas is heated. Take a look at this. Israel supporters are using the hashtag #PrayForIsrael, while those concerned about the plight of Palestinians in Gaza are tweeting with the hashtag Gaza under attack. On Wednesday, when Israel launched its attack, the Israeli army tweeted this, which has sparked a lot of controversy. We recommend that no Hamas operatives, whether low-level or senior leaders, show their faces above ground in the days ahead. They followed it up with this image of Ahmed Jabari, the military leader of Hamas, and the word eliminated. Hamas countered with this tweet: "Our blessed hands will reach your leaders and soldiers wherever they are. You open the gates of hells on yourself." In addition to the tough talk online, social media is also getting the story out, which makes sense since the electricity in Gaza has been unreliable. Joining us now via Skype from Jerusalem is Avi Meir, new media director at the Jewish Agency for Israel, and Harry Fears, a documentary filmmaker in Gaza, who's been live streaming the events. Also from Gaza, we have Raina Baker, who's been live tweeting this, along with Mohammed Suleiman. Both are joining us on the phone because, as we mentioned before, the power has been unreliable, but that hasn't kept them off Twitter. Mohammed, something's happened right where you are just recently. Can you tell us what's going on there?
Well, I'm now in the north of Gaza Strip. I live in an area that is called Al-Karam neighborhood, and I'm talking actually to you while I'm outside in the street because if I go inside, there is no signal, so I wouldn't be able to talk to you. The area that I'm in has just been hit by a series of explosions, and which resulted in a complete blackout. So there is no power now in the area, and many families that live in my building, in the whole actually neighborhood, have started moving out. They left the neighborhood because they feel that it's actually an unsafe place to be in. So they started moving to areas which are a bit further from the attacks, although as it's obvious when there's no area that you can describe as safe at the moment in the Gaza Strip.
I want to pull in our online community here for a second. I have a tweet here from Alice. She says the divide between Israel and Palestine is obvious on Twitter. Tons of accusations on both sides, very little compassion. I also have a tweet here from Elizabeth. She's a blogger in Israel. She says, I see Twitter mainly as a propaganda tool, which both sides use. So, Omar, I want to pose this question to you. Would you agree? Are we seeing social media being used to promote propaganda?
There's no question that that's the case. I think like any interactive platform, it can be used both to build connections as well as being used to score points against different teams. And it's very difficult to actually build meaningful connections in 140 characters. So I think it ends up being a much more apt venue for scoring points, things like correcting facts, linking to articles, and leveling attacks. Those things can be achieved through a platform like that, and I think that's how we're seeing it for the most part being used in this case.
I want to bring in Avi here, who's in Jerusalem. So, Avi, is Twitter the new battleground?
I mean, I think it is to some extent. I would like to amend something that was said earlier and note that I personally feel for the people of Gaza, who I think really are being held hostage by the terrorist regime that controls that territory, and has been involved in a campaign of disinformation and really not having its best the best interests of its people in mind. I think that it has indeed developed into a battleground, as you've noted. I think that we have information being fed in from both sides, but at least the information that I've seen has indicated that the pro-Israel side has been somewhat more accurate in its reporting. There was a photo that was circulating yesterday. It was actually being distributed by Hamas, that had emerged had actually been taken in Syria. And there have been many instances like that in the past. And so I think it's very important for also social media users to be vigilant and to make sure they're getting their information from reputable sources.
Well, Israel's social media tactics and olives have been very sophisticated. Take a look at their Tumblr blog, which has a lot of material, including this YouTube post.
Israel, like any other country, has the right and the obligation to protect its citizens from harm. Terror organizations operating with the ruling power in Gaza, Hamas, intentionally target Israeli civilians with rocket attacks.
Omar, what do you think about what Avi said in terms of it? It seems that Hamas has been, propagandizing on social media.
I mean, again, propaganda is used by everyone, and the idea that Israel has been any more honest in the use of social media in the past or currently, I think, is belied by a very well-documented history. Groups like Camera and Honest Reporting have been documented thoroughly to have made claims that turned out to be completely false. Again, I don't think that that's where the focus ought to be. It's not about which side is using propaganda more, effectively. In this case, whatever you think of Hamas, and I certainly am not a fan myself, they were elected by the population. And the party that is actually holding Gaza hostage right now is Israel. It has continued the occupation of Gaza despite pulling out the settlements, continues to keep the area under military control, continues with regular military incursions into the Gaza Strip and carrying out assassinations, blocking it by sea, and so on. That's really the core of the problem, is that we can go into this tit for tat about who fired this rocket when and who shot this bullet when. But ultimately, I think fundamentally what is going to be required to solve this issue is a full resolution to the conflict, which entails first and foremost ending the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories, because that is the number one factor that lets this conflict carry on and the violence continue.
When you look at Twitter and propaganda, they always say that the first victim in war is the truth. And it just seems like with social media, that victim just comes that much faster. Right? It's made it quicker. Exactly. What's happening with our community?
Picking up on that theme, I have a tweet here from Shafika. She says, social media brings more truth from the voices and raw stories, footages, in a manner the corporate media is unable to capture. I also have a tweet here from Diana. She says, social media has the power to even out somewhat the unbalanced media coverage of Israel's war on Palestine. So, Avi, I want to pose this question to you. Who would you say is winning the online war?
I think that there have been sort of back and forths both ways. I think that in recent days we've seen some success on the anti-Israel side, but the pro-Israel side actually had some success today. Unfortunately, when a couple of rockets were apparently fired towards Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv actually was trending worldwide for a brief period. And there was also a trend over the past 24 hours or so entitled Hamas bumper stickers, which is sort of a more humorous take on the situation. Some of the tweets were more humorous, some were more crass, but those were some notable pro-Israel successes. And I think that the international community realizes that the Israeli narrative is certainly much closer to the truth than some of the vitriol and the hateful lies that you hear on the other side. I'd just like to counter what was stated earlier. I think that I agree that a peaceful resolution of the conflict is definitely needed. But Israel took an extremely painful step in 2005, evacuating the Gaza Strip of all its civilian and military personnel, and was rewarded with thousands upon thousands of rockets. Israel has been struck by more than 13,000 rockets since 2001. And that's a factor that seems to often be left out of the conversation of whether or not this conflict is soluble.
Speaking of painful steps, we have someone on the phone right now who's in Gaza. I want to go to Rana. Rana, AP is reporting that Israeli troops are moving toward the border as we speak. Can you tell us what you're seeing there and how you're keeping up with events?
Well, first of all, I live in Gaza City. I don't live in border areas. But what is obvious is that Israel has been escalating its attack on the Gaza Strip in the past few hours. And this has been obvious in the relentless shelling of the Gaza Strip. We've been witnessing continuous attacks from Israeli warships as well as F-16s and Israeli Apaches. So I think that the next few hours will be tense in the Gaza Strip. We will witness more killings. We will witness more murder and, of course, injuries. Now we have an emergency situation in Shifa Hospital, which is the largest hospital in the Gaza Strip. And I live just across the hospital, and that's why I can tell that there are so many ambulances flowing into the hospital. And I can tell you also that since yesterday, 26 women have been evacuated to hospital and have been injured as a result of the Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip.
Wow. All right. We want to bring this back to the social media part of this discussion, so I want to bring Harry in. Harry, I was watching you this morning live streaming on Ustream. Can you tell us, I guess, what gave you the idea to Ustream this, and then what kind of response have you gotten?
Well, I use Ustream rather than Livestream just because Ustream is slightly easier to manage when you're in a sort of stressful situation. The reason why I switched to Ustream was because we heard that the operation had been started, that it was very obvious with the assassination of this senior Hamas military official that an operation was going to be launched imminently. And so we immediately produced a video explaining what had just happened. But as the facts came in, it became clear that we were unable to produce videos at the rate required to keep people up to date. So we had to switch to a live streaming method of getting the information out to the English-speaking world. And the information we're getting out is from local Palestinians on the ground, mixed with international news sources, a melange of sources. So we're getting this stuff out as quickly as possible to people in North America and Europe.
Have you seen your hits, demands, or views going up as this goes on?
Yeah, we're now on something like 8,000 people watching the stream. We started off with 67 people in the first hour. This has gone viral.
I want to pull in our online community here for a second. It is on fire. We're getting about 60 tweets per minute. I have a tweet here from Hamad. He says, Israel relies on media to distort the occupation and pretend it's a victim. It uses social media in the same way. I also have a tweet here from Yasmin. She says, fancy graphics and social media smarts do not trump the facts. Who started? Who is paying a higher price? Who is helping to stop it? So I want to pose that to you, Omar. Would you say that people might be getting distracted with people's fancy graphics, but the facts are the facts?
Yeah, I think it's becoming increasingly difficult in this day and age when everybody can fact check everything and everybody can weigh in immediately on stuff that's happening for these types of gimmicks to actually have an impact. I mean, just looking at the social media aspect of it specifically, there was an article in the Washington Post last night that basically mentioned that the hashtag Gaza under attack was being used by a margin of 150 to 1 compared to the hashtag that the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, were using, which is the name of the operation, Pillar of Defense. And they framed it, unfortunately, misguidedly under the headline, is Hamas winning the Twitter war? And of course, Hamas is not the one that's winning. I mean, the growing awareness of what is actually happening in Gaza and sympathy with the Palestinians who are living under Israeli bombardment, that's not a victory for Hamas, but that's just a wider understanding of what Israel's policies are in the Gaza Strip and how the narrative that they're defensive is completely wrong. I mean, we just heard Avi a little bit earlier talking about all the rockets that were being fired out of Gaza. But if you do a statistical comparison on all the incoming fire from Israel into Gaza, I mean, there's no comparison in terms of the amount of shelling that is happening, in terms of the casualties, the size of the damage, and so on. I mean, this is not a defensive, Israel's posture is not a defensive one. Looking at, like the number of Palestinians who have been killed just over the past couple of days is greater than the number of Israelis that have been killed over the past 3 years in fire that is coming out of Gaza.
Avi, I want to give you a chance to respond to that.
Yeah, I think the really significant difference between Israel and Hamas is that Hamas makes no pretense of simply targeting military figures or targets, It makes it very clear that its targets are civilians, men, women, children living in towns and cities throughout Israel, whereas it has taken the extremely cynical and frankly disgusting step of locating its facilities and acting from within civilian populations in Gaza, essentially drawing Israeli retaliatory fire to those civilians. And this is something that they've said actually very openly. Back in 2009, a Hamas official said very openly that they gladly use men, women, children, the elderly as human shields. And I think it's rather striking that that's not something that people in Gaza are recognizing. I think that once that recognition really comes to the fore, we will be actually prepared to resolve this conflict on an equal and peaceful level.
Well, one of the videos being shared online is very disturbing, so I want to warn our viewers here. It's a child that was killed, and this footage originally aired on Hamas's Al-Aqsa channel. It was being widely circulated. We blurred the image, but it's caused a debate about who was responsible for the death. Hamas says it was an Israeli strike. Israel's spokesperson said earlier on Al Jazeera that some casualties may have come after an Israeli airstrike caused subsequent explosions at a nearby Hamas weapons site. So I know you wanted to respond to what Avi was saying there.
I mean, in this case, it's one child, but that's not the first or the last child that it has been killed or will be killed by
well, I've seen photos and videos of children on both sides. It seems like that's the ultimate trump card you're going to play in social media. Is this tough to look at?
And it's extremely tragic, and it actually brings it back to the humor that the Israeli Defense Forces are, the tactics they're using on Twitter. They're trying to turn this into, frankly, they're behaving like high school bullies on Twitter by trying to turn this thing into humor, saying honk if you're about to get hit by an Israeli rocket from the sky, or I fired that many rockets and all I got was this this bumper sticker. That type of humor and LOLs and what have you. When you're talking about an operation where children are being killed, I think is extremely distasteful. This is not a video game. When people are dying, even if you're under the obligation to play that propaganda role of defending Israel's behavior, at least do it in a way that is not completely insensitive to the human tragedy that is actually unfolding in this case.
Sorry, I'm going to bring our online community here for a second. I have a tweet from Lubna. She says, social media reviving the human and real aspects of occupation. Gaza tweets embody what Palestinians have suffered for too long. I also have a tweet here from Adria. She says, IDF's aggressive social media campaign is a testament to need for professional PR in this indefensible campaign promoting violence. So I want to give that comment to you, Avi. Would you agree with what our online community member just said? Is this a campaign promoting violence?
I definitely do not agree with that. I think that Israeli leaders, Israeli officials, the Israeli people have said all along that their sole goal is to restore peace and quiet to the southern border. You've had 1 million Israelis living in the shadow of rocket fire for 11 years now. And if the reports from earlier on are correct, we now have an additional 3.2 million Israelis living in the greater Tel Aviv area who are now within rocket range as well. This is a situation that is untenable. It is unacceptable. My own sister was within rocket range earlier today, and I was frankly terrified for her. And this is something that has got to stop. And I agree, I think, with an earlier statement that the only solution is a peaceful resolution of the conflict, where Hamas and other terrorist organizations renounce violence, abide by prior agreements with Israel, and on a most fundamental level, recognize Israel's right to exist.
Well, let's bring the reality of what's happening right now back in. I want to see if we have Mohammed on the phone still. Mohammed, are you there? Are you still in the street? And how are you keeping up with what's happening around you?
Well, now there's things have calmed down a little bit. So there's nothing really going on around me, apart from the fact, which I mentioned already, that a blackout has taken over the whole area, and many families have left their places. So there's increasing number of people who are just leaving and moving out of their places.
Mohammed, are people using social media as a tool there to stay informed about the events and what's happening and where they should be moving to or away from?
To use social media, sorry, to what?
Are people using social media to keep up with events there?
Well, not everyone, because, again, for example, I myself use social media pretty much all the time, but, again, because it depends on the availability of electricity, of equipment, of everything. So it's not easy for everyone to gain access to the internet and update others about what is going on. So, I would say people use social media in order to let others know about what is going on.
Mohammed, can you give us your tag on Twitter so that our followers can follow you?
I am Palestine.
I'm Palestine.
Yeah.
Okay, and I want to go to Rana. We're going to put these on our website as well, so you can check them out later. Rana, I know you've been tweeting the whole time. What are you trying to keep people informed about?
Yeah, I would like just to add a comment to what Avi had to say, and it is very interesting that he was talking about the killing of Israeli civilians, because since yesterday, only 3 Israelis were killed, while in Palestine, in Gaza, we have about 15 civilians who have been killed since yesterday. We have more than 100 injured in the Shifa hospital right now. So it is really, really interesting that he's talking about the killings of civilians, while he is totally ignoring the fact that the people of Gaza have been killed since yesterday. We have also, I mean, if he wants an evidence, of course I can give you one. Yesterday we had Rinan Arafat, who was murdered. She's 7 years old. We had also an infant, an 11-month infant, who was killed yesterday. So I think that the list goes on, and if I want to just keep talking about names and mentioning names, it will be endless. This is the thing that I wanted Avi to look into.
Our online community is really on a roll. We are up to 85 tweets per minute. I have a tweet here from Mila. She says, Twitter gives the false impression of equal capabilities between Israel and Gaza instead of homemade rockets versus modern military. So, Omar, I want to pose that comment to you. Would you agree? Are we getting false impressions from social media?
There's no question that there's no balance in capability, and we can see it in the actual casualties and damage that we're seeing right now. I mean, it's one thing to say, for Avi to say, I think, and I agree with him, that we need to end this crisis, and the right thing to do is to stop the violence and stop the firing of rockets. But Israel's military escalation is not the way to actually scale back those rockets. This is a way to further escalate it. We know that, the chronology does matter. I think in American media, there is this reflexive adoption of Israel's narrative that this is Hamas firing rockets and Israel being forced to respond, when actually looking further into the details of this, you see that a couple of days before the fire rocket, that there had been multiple Palestinians killed, and it's completely arbitrary to pick the firing of rockets as the starting point. On just the other point that he mentioned about the targeting of civilians, he said Hamas targets indiscriminately, fires at civilians, and Israel doesn't. And frankly, they actually both do. The difference is Hamas is open about what it does, and Israel is more savvy.
I want to get a quick sense of you. We're coming to the end of the show. Will social media make a difference in this conflict, and if so, how?
I think it is already making a difference in that people actually now can, again, I don't think you see it just in this conflict, but generally speaking, the fact that everybody has the capacity to fact check everything that is happening and get much more dispersed access to information from people who are actually on the ground is making it more and more difficult for governments to use their propaganda techniques to obscure the truth.
I'd like to throw the same question at you. Will social media make a difference in this conflict, and how?
I think it already has. I think that the reality where in Hamas's eyes, killing a child is an operational success, and in Israeli eyes, when a Palestinian child is unfortunately killed as a result of Israeli action, it's a devastating operational error, is very much coming to light through social media. I think it's something that we're seeing both through official channels and through private individuals. And I'm very hopeful that it's something that will really help us all get a little bit more clarity on how to solve this conflict that's really been vexing us for such a long time.
Harry, you're going to continue on Ustream? Because we're gonna put that on our Storyfy page.
Continue on Ustream. We've got a lot of news to update in the next half an hour as things escalate in Gaza.
Great. So people can go to our Storyfy page to find your Ustream. They can also find the Twitter accounts for Mohammed and Rana. I want to thank Omar, Avi, Rana, Mohammed, and Harry. We'll continue to follow this story online at stream.aljazeera.com. You can get on the discussion by tweeting us at #AJStream. On Monday, the growing abortion debate in Ireland. And until then, we'll see you online.